my friends, a very different video today. We talk about disturbing films a lot on this channel, but something we have not done is ranked them based on how truly disturbing they are. So today we're focusing on the disturbing factor within these films, not how much we like them. So really pay attention to that. If you want to skip forward until the ranking starts, that is totally fine. I'm just going to explain really quickly how I came to this. Today we're only focusing on horror, and although that's really hard to do because there's a lot of crossover between horror and thriller and psychological and basically anything disturbing a lot of people shove into the horror genre, I've only taken titles that have horror in the genre keywords on IMDb within the first 3 genres, because if it's labeled with 6 or 7 genres, of course horror is going to be one of them. I also got to this list by asking you on Instagram and on my community page about horror movies and, you know, going over some lists that I personally had just to make sure I was getting a bit of everything. So unfortunately films like Antichrist and Funny Games did not make the cut this time. And I say this time because if you do like this video, I will just do a disturbing dramas, disturbing psychological films. We can break all of that down and do a different tier list for that. I want to thank my Patreon Rob for this idea. It seems very straightforward, but I hadn't thought of it myself. Thank you so much, Extreme Bob. The purpose of this video is to spark debate on the difference between disturbing aspects and straight up horror. I rewatched a couple of movies just to keep them fresh in my mind before doing this list, so I've been through it today. But let's get started. Here are the tiers. So we start at the bottom. This is just horror. That's our F. These are the films that people dub on the internet as disturbing, but in my own opinion, of course this is going to be based on my opinions as someone who loves horror and loves disturbing movies, I find these just to be in the horror genre, and I wouldn't particularly call them disturbing. The second tier up is disturbing scene or aspect, so a horror movie that has just one disturbing part in it. We haven't got The Mist here today, but you would put films like The Mist in there. Films that just have one disturbing aspect, but the whole thing doesn't carry that ongoing theme. See, we've got so disturbing that it stays with you. I don't think this one needs much explanation, but I think that this is bordering actual disturbing films that I would recommend as disturbing. And of course they stick with you long after, give you nightmares, all that good stuff. And then we go up from here to extremely disturbing, but camp. And camp to me, and within this list, means absurdly exaggerated, theatrical, artificial, usually in a humorous way. So films that are totally over the top, because disturbing is a lot, but sometimes it's done in over the top ways, and you'll see plenty of these on the list. If you're unsure about what this means, you will understand by the end. I had to put this in here because it's so hard to talk about horror films that don't take themselves too seriously, but the themes are just horrific. From here, we have truly traumatizing. The truly traumatizing stuff I'd be really hesitant to recommend to someone in my real life, but I'd love recommending to you guys. And then of course we have S, and the S tier is vile, evil, shock value. So these are the disturbing films where I believe just to be disturbing and shocking is the intent, and not really to even have a storyline. Films that are just gross, absolutely disgusting, and whatever the disturbing nature of them is, it's so beyond anything you should see in film, and it does not add to the story in any way. It's all for shock value. Remember, these are horror only. A Serbian film is the first. I love that I have to start with this film. I feel very strongly about this movie, and I know a lot of other people do. If you've seen this film, you'll understand that there are some themes flowing throughout, and it is, believe it or not, it does have a political meaning about censorship. So as much as this film, if you haven't seen it, does seem like a movie that is just going for shock value, especially if you've heard about the intense scene, I would totally understand a lot of people putting it all the way up the top. I really have to prove myself very fast within the first couple of minutes of this video. I am putting my life on the line, but I would actually call a Serbian film a truly traumatizing movie. I think it will always stick with me, but it is traumatizing. It doesn't belong down here. I can tell you that much. It's all the way up here. The content in it is evil, but I do think it has purpose within the story that the filmmakers intend to tell. I should have kept that one for later. Okay, next we have Audition. This is a Japanese film that has a very strange, stirring experience. It feels unsettling until you get to those final moments or final scenes that really reveal all. If you haven't seen it, it's about a businessman who is auditioning for a partner. And it does not go well. Let's just say that. It's a gory film, but it's a film with many reveals. So if you had a high tolerance, you could definitely put it in a disturbing scene or aspect, but I do think that there's a lot more than that. I would definitely put it in C for me. It is a solid, disturbing film. It is no way just a horror movie, so I will give it that. It's a disturbing film, and I do think it sticks with a lot of people. I see this one come up time and time again with results every time I ask you for a disturbing movie, so I'm very happy with that placement. Barbarian was a very surprising horror movie that shocked a lot of people, but it is quite campy. The movie is about a couple of people who end up sharing an Airbnb. There is so much more history to that Airbnb than they could ever have imagined. Barbarian does have a lot of really interesting themes that I think push the boundary, but I don't think it's that intense. Is that silly? It's kind of campy. I didn't find Barbarian to be that disturbing. Disturbing in a very satisfying way, but for me, this was just horror. This is what I expect in a normal horror movie. I felt it to be more scary, especially any scenes more that were drawn out with them in, let's just say, dark places. I felt like that was more of what's coming, what's around the corner, very much like The Descent, more than the overarching theme. Although when you put it all together, it is quite disturbing. Ooh. Is it disturbing? I don't know. I'm happy with it here. I feel like for me, that's just horror, baby. Okay, Cannibal Holocaust. I would love to know where you guys think this goes. Cannibal Holocaust, although it's become a cult classic, I think that it's wavered in popularity throughout the last decade. I think that people have seen it for its shock value now, where that was appealing before, when we were all very much looking forward to an edgy movie. Now, a lot of the behind the scenes and the way it was put together, the animal cruelty, everything kind of comes out, and when you watch it, it doesn't really hold up as well as it used to. Saying that Cannibal Holocaust used to hold up to anything is a very weird thing, but I would say it is a very disturbing movie. A lot of people talk about some of the scenes being the standout, the turtle, the bicycle. If you don't know the bicycle, basically there is a shot in the film that is very famous. It's said that the director had to prove how the shot was made because they didn't believe that it wasn't real. I feel like people do tend to point out disturbing scenes and aspects in it, so that would make sense. But honestly, I find this film to not have a great message, even though it is toying on almost getting there, and it's almost like Green Inferno, which was Eli Roth's kind of follow-up to this, very highly inspired by Cannibal Holocaust, did a better job, believe it or not, at creating this message. But I do think it goes up the top. For me, it is very shocking. And when I say evil, I think it's evil the way it completely missed the message. And there is a very intense sexual assault moment in this film. Warning, by the way, because we're going to talk about that quite a bit in this video. Speaking of Dead Girl, I did not mix these around at all before I started. I think we're going by alphabetical order, actually. Dead Girl, I rewatched today just to get it fresh in my mind. I really wish I hadn't. Not my favorite pastime. How do I talk about this without giving spoilers? Basically, it's an assault film through and through. Every character in this film is horrendous, and it is just pure shock. I did think when I was watching it, what is the intent? It was almost like Cannibal Holocaust, where there was something in there they were trying to say, but they really stray the message and completely ignore it, which is really sad because it could have been a meaningful film, or at least had, you know, a meaning. So for me, this is evil, vile, almost, is it traumatizing? I wish there was a spot for you both. It's traumatizing, but without any message or intent. So it does feel like it's evil. It's just for the shock value. You know what? I am keeping it there. I think it is a very shocking horror movie. I would not recommend it to majority of you. I wouldn't. I honestly wouldn't. Eden Lake is a movie about a couple. It's a UK film about a couple who go on a holiday and are basically hunted. It's a stranger danger film that is very disturbing. I believe it really gets under your skin. It does feel at points like this is just horror, but I have to say Eden Lake throughout all of the years has very much stuck with me. So I'm going to put it in disturbing. That stays with you. Have you seen Eden Lake and you totally forgot what happened? How? Tell me your ways. Okay, Excision. This is one of the strangest films about a strange girl who is not fitting in and having a lot of problems with society. Let's just say that. It's a very bloody film, very gory, very interesting. I don't know. I don't find it to be upsetting. I feel like it has intent and a very strong purpose. Although it has some disturbingness, I probably wouldn't put it here. I probably might put it in disturbing scenes or aspects, because there's more aspects that I think are strange and weird. And then there's a couple of scenes that really stick in my head as being disturbing, just these parts. So I'm actually gonna put it there. I wonder what you would do. Tell me below. Found. Now this is an interesting film. Found and Headless should really go together. These films, Headless is a film within Found. Found I spoke about on my channel many years ago. There's a lot of reviews I've done on my channel about disturbing films over the whole time I've been online, which has been 10 years doing YouTube videos. I feel very different about a lot of these films than I did back then. And Found is a film that probably takes you 6 or several times to fully process what you've seen. And I definitely feel a little bit different about this film, although I love it. It is a really interesting indie horror film about this boy and something that he finds out about his brother that changes his life. This was one of the first horror movies I saw with such an interesting perspective to something so disturbing, and it didn't waver at all, which I really liked. It kind of doubled down on that, and I very much appreciate its rawness and how brutal it is, because it's not really holding back at all. But where would I put it on here? I actually would put it on, I don't think it belongs next to these two. That's my thing. I actually think I'm gonna put it in, God, it doesn't really belong next to Serbian film either. Found has really stuck with me throughout time. I don't know if it's truly traumatizing or if I've just lost the plot at this stage. But I will say its counterpart. So within Found, there is a movie they talk about, which inspires some gore, some violence, which is called Headless. This film, I barely got through. I hate this film. It is disgusting. It is gore for the sake of gore. It is vile. It's honestly really gross. This is what I mean by shock value. There's no intent in this film at all, but to be a film that kind of came from the lore of Found. So I would definitely stick that up the top, no problems. And another one that I'm gonna pair with it, this is Devil's Experiment, which is the first of the Japanese guinea pig films. I have done a whole video on these. I just needed one of them, because honestly, they all do go together. And I would put this up the top, no question. It is shocking. It is evil. I wouldn't even say it's a story, but it's basically a series of shots it's a film made about just torture. It's over the top. It's a little bit campy because of the exaggeration of it, but I think that says more about the way it was put together and the independent value of the film. If you want to watch something that is just shock value for shock value, all of the guinea pig films, the Japanese ones, definitely. I still have not done the American guinea pig. I don't know if I can, guys. Do you want me to? A film that I was really surprised, but am I, that you guys kept bringing up is Hereditary. This is a film a lot of people cannot get over. I've got a Hereditary poster back here that's always here. It always stays with me because it always sticks with me. Toni Collette, who makes me a very proud Australian. This is the film about her family who are going through extreme grief that leads to some questions about their hereditary, about their history of the family. There is definitely some shocking aspect moments in this film, I would say, some really disturbing scenes, but for a lot of you, you said that it has stayed with you. Do I believe that Hereditary is a disturbing film that sticks with you, or do I think it's just like brilliant horror? No, you're right. You guys are right. You guys are right. Who was screaming at me? I want to know. This must be so infuriating to watch. I'm sorry, guys. We've got Hostel. I wanted to put at least one of the Hostel films in there. I think that they both have a very similar feeling. I would say Hostel is a gore fest, and it's shocking for sure. It's shocking for shock value. But do I think that it's anything past that? Not really. I know that's crazy, but it is just gore, and it really is just escape gore. You know, it's akin to Saw, which I would say is just horror as well. It's definitely bloody and gory and gross, and there's some eye action and some, you know, some things get chopped that we don't want to see. But that is horror, man. That's horror. What horror film doesn't have that? I really think that Hostel is just a horror movie. That's how I feel. I really feel that way. I just realized we do have Saw coming up as well. I do think that this reflects on the psychology behind horror movies and what actually stays with you and traumatizes you and that you find disturbing. I think that some themes are more disturbing than others. And although human torture in films like Guinea Pig, I would put all the way up the top, it's the way that we approach them as a storyline. And although they really take it a step further and really helped put the title on the torture porn subgenre, it's not the most disturbing thing I've ever seen, but it's a complete gore fest. Does that make sense? I'm gonna reorder these because they should go in order. Human Centipede. If you don't know, I am a fan of the Human Centipede films, and I am very sorry about that. It's an acquired taste, and it's not for everybody. I am very aware. How many of you have actually seen Human Centipede? I would love to know. I would put the first Human Centipede up here. Human Centipede is a camp film. It's an eccentric director, Tom Six, who made a film about a crazy doctor who comes up with this experiment that puts these people in a compromising position. And again, this is really interesting to have back-to-back, no pun intended, from Hostel, because we're talking about, again, torture, for one person's satisfaction, the power play, loss of autonomy, a lot of horrific things. But Human Centipede is more of a disturbing element because of the creativity behind it, but it's also exaggerated. It's over the top. It takes it to the next level. I don't think a lot of people were ready for that, and I don't think a lot of people saw the humor, I say that lightly, on the internet in front of 100,000 people. It's put together in a very campy, over-the-top way. I need to stop explaining myself. The second film, though, does have more of a sinister feel. I have done an interview with the villain from the second one, if you haven't checked that out. But this film, I feel like, was so much more sinister. It has some really horrific aspects outside of the idea of the centipede, some very visceral moments of gore, and different aspects that happen to different entities. I'm trying not to say anything to spoil, but also to literally traumatize you. I do think that this film is actual splatter, and it's done in a weird way that it's black and white because it's kind of like art, so it kind of is campy, but I do think that this film was pure shock value. Believe it or not, I'm going to split these ones up, and I would put Human Centipede 2 as probably the worst Human Centipede, in terms of how disgusting it is and the shock value, and because other things are involved in this film. If you don't know, you can look it up. Other things are involved in this film outside of the centipede. Could you imagine if I knew when I was a child what I was gonna do when I was an adult as a job? Not this, I would never have predicted. Moving on swiftly, we have Human Centipede 3. I am a fan of Human Centipede 3. It takes place within a prison, which is part of the original idea and concept behind Human Centipede, which is the idea that Tom Six, the director, he was thinking about with his friends. This is where he said the concept came from. The worst thing they could do to punish humans who have done horrific crimes. And it all comes back to Human Centipede 3 because that is prisoners. This film is very different to the other ones. It's done in a prison setting, but there's like a whimsy kind of over the top aspect, bringing that outside of the doctor's house from the first one, where we see these different types of over exaggerated stereotypes within this film. It's just quite nutty. So for me, I would put Human Centipede 3 in camp. Believe it or not, I think that these films are camp. I think a lot of people have misjudged what was going on with Human Centipede. The video today was actually, let's see how many people I can get to unsubscribe from me. I Spit on Your Grave. Okay, this film kind of coined the term, or is the film that people put as the face of rape revenge horror movies. I find these films really hard to watch. I only put the first one down because I feel like the other ones, even putting it on here, is kind of like an insult. These films are total exploitation and don't really have too much narrative except for giving the male gaze to a horrific experience. I actually find these films to be pure shock value. And I would love to hear if you have a different opinion on that in the comments. I would really love to hear that, because for me, it is truly a traumatizing film. But because of the perspective it takes, I feel like it belongs in shock value for sure. For sure. I find all of these films up the top, I find really, really, really hard to rewatch. I do find this one hard to rewatch too, don't worry. But I find all of those ones up the top, I would never put myself in the position to rewatch them, even though I did rewatch Dead Girl today. That was fun. Ichi the Killer is a Japanese action horror movie. It is a very strange, bizarre film that kind of would border on the definition we spoke about earlier. That's why it was important for us to go through definitions of camp. But the film does have a psychological aspect, because not only does it talk about torture, but it has the lead character, how they're influenced to do that and why they're led to that. I feel like it does have a lot of intent. So I would actually put Ichi the Killer in truly traumatizing. I think that some of the scenes are really gory. There's a lot of brutality and torture, but I do think that it serves the plot. Inside is a French film. If you haven't seen this film, oh my gosh, so much blood, and do not watch it if you're pregnant. It is about a pregnant woman who is approached by a stranger in her house, and it is horrific. It is so gory, so intense. This film just really got me. It's just so intense and so detailed, but a really good watch. I think I'm gonna put it in so disturbing that it stays with you. I think it belongs there. I wouldn't say it's truly traumatizing. I've definitely watched it a couple of times and gone back for more. So I think that it belongs there. It's quite a serious film too. I would recommend it. Martyrs! This is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. This one's French-Canadian horror film. There's so many moments that really stick out in this film. The bathroom scene being one, and the ending. So you could put it in disturbing scene and aspects, but the whole film is disturbing. The absolute whole film has traumatized, I think, a whole generation. I really don't know how to sum this up really easily for you guys talking about Martyrs, but it's about two friends who have gone through some hardships together, tracking down some people who hurt one of them. Let's just say that. Martyrs, without a doubt for me, goes in truly traumatizing. I watched Megan is Missing, or Megan is Missing, depending on what country you're from. I watched that today because I hadn't seen it since I did a review on it 8 years ago. And let me tell you, when I rewatched that review I did that's 3 minutes long, I don't think my forebrain had completely finished developing. And I do take that as an excuse, okay? Because it is in your late 20s. And what I said in that review is so odd. This film is so disturbing. The production value and the polishing of the film, it doesn't quite come together. It feels like they do have an intent, but it's not really fully developed, like my brain. If you haven't seen it, it is a strange kind of call to action about the dangers of the internet with children, and how anyone who is lost or is seeking validation or attention can wind up in the most darkest places on earth. And this film puts that together in a found footage format with some really disturbing scenes, some really epic disturbing scenes. But I really do think it goes a step further than anything here. It's very intense, the subject matter. It's just very graphic. It's a very, very graphic film. I would actually put it up here, which is really surprising to me. I don't think that I remembered how intense it was until I watched it again today. And I'm saying that as someone who's watched everything disturbing that I've seen in the last 10 years, and being able to balance that out. I don't know if I've gotten softer, but that really affected me. And I can definitely see why there's a lot of kickback about that film online. Midsommar. I love the director's cut, especially of Midsommar. If you haven't seen the director's cut, you are really missing out. It's such an amazing transformation of the film. They add so much more context into certain situations, and I think that it completely changes the film. For me, I don't find Midsommar as disturbing as other people. I think of it more as cathartic, but I do find there are some disturbing elements, especially the start. I guess I see it for it being a story about a couple who are on the verge of breaking up, and that kind of cycle and how that's applied to a metaphor of something else. The film is about a couple who go with their friends to a small village in Sweden and attend these midsummer festivities and how it is culturally very different. It's hard not putting Midsummer next to Hereditary. Of course, you cannot compare them. But for me, Midsummer, it's more about the elements within it than the overarching themes that feel more emotional. And I know it's psychological, but it feels more emotional from the girl in the film, Danny's perspective, where I would almost put Midsummer here. Is that a strange thing to say? I know it feels weird to put it below Eden Lake. It's disturbing and it sticks with you, but is it the disturbing part that's sticking with you, or is it just a really good film? I'm gonna do something controversial just so you talk about it in the comments. I'm gonna put it here. Okay, Mother. This is a film that was really interesting that it even made this list, because I honestly didn't think it was going to go past the specifications I had of being a horror movie, but it really is a horror movie, and it's shown as that, which I think is really interesting. If you haven't seen it, it's very hard to explain, but basically it's the story of a couple within a house and all of their fears transpiring, but it's also a very deep metaphor for biblical texts. This film you cannot understand the first time you watch. It's hard to take in. There's a lot of disturbing aspects. There is a lot of disturbing scenes, but it's the overall unnervingness of this film that makes it a hard watch. It just does not let up the whole film. So it is a disturbing film. It does stick with you. Is it truly traumatizing? I don't think so. I still wouldn't put up there with Martyrs, but maybe that's just because I find those films have really realistic and real life kind of consequences, where Mother, I don't feel the same way. But will Mother stay with you? Probably. You know what? I'm gonna put Mother in here because I think Mother is so disturbing it stays with you. I love Raw. Raw is another French horror movie. This one is about a girl going to college and something awakens within her. For me, Raw definitely has some fun themes, some gory times, some, I guess, disturbing aspects, scenes, but it is all in all just a horror movie to me. I don't think of Raw as any more horrific as any other, gory flick out there. The Resurrection, this is one that someone mentioned to me on YouTube. I loved The Resurrection. I did, I think, 2 videos on it. I absolutely love this film. It's a very strange drama horror about a toxic relationship, and it really gets under your skin. It's very psychological, and the ending is disgusting. Absolutely horrendous. That scene alone just gets under my skin, and for that alone I'm gonna give it disturbing scenes and aspects, because I think it's a very interesting way that it poses it all, but there's only a couple of moments that were sheer disturbing terror for me. The rest felt very unnerving, and it's a very chilling film. I highly recommend it. Saw, we've already spoken about this. I didn't even realize Saw was on the list when I spoke about this earlier. For me, Saw is gory. Saw is a fun, interesting twist of events, and that's kind of its purpose. And for that, I would just call it a horror movie. I think Saw is such a great movie. It's disturbing, but in a way that horror movies are meant to kind of shock you a little bit. I wouldn't say it's anything past what a lot of crime mystery thrillers do. It feels very grounded in horror as well, having a masked villain. In this case, I guess Billy the Puppet. We have Jigsaw, and we have, the pig mask and all that, but it just feels very straight up horror to me. Speaking of that, Sinister, which has the boogeyman, Boogie. This is a film that I know gets under a lot of people's skin. For me, this is quintessential, you're at a sleepover party. My sleepovers are really fun. And this is a film you put on because it's shit scary. The thing is, I'm not saying that these films that are in horror aren't scary. I'm saying they're not seeking to disturb. And I think that Sinister's purpose is to straight up scare you. It's all in the dark. It's got a little bit of, I guess it's kind of found footage aspect with them finding the tapes and showing that. It's about a family and a chain of events and a circle and a mystery within that. So I would put Sinister, I think Sinister's just a horror movie, guys. Okay, Speak No Evil. This is another one that I was interested that this made the list. this could definitely just go into a disturbing list or a thriller list instead of a horror. So I think that's strange. Of course, we have the upcoming remake as well to look forward to, which has a great cast, but it's a very strange thing to remake. If you haven't seen this film, it's about two families who meet, and one is Danish and they're kind of too polite, which is a commentary on the country and something people say about Danish people anyway, and they start putting up with all of these red flags within the other family, and it spirals. It has some great moments, some great twists. I almost would put this in here because I do think that it's just a couple of elements that are quite disturbing. I don't know, would you put that any higher? That is my question to you. I'm trying to see what it's sitting with, because it probably should go like above where Eden Lake is, or where to Eden Lake. I mean, it does stick with you. Where would you guys put it? Tell me. You know what? I'm gonna put it up there. I do think it stays with you quite a long time. I don't put it in this is just horror. I do think it's a cut above. And it has great intent and purpose. Yeah, I think it belongs there. I think that that's fine. Because it's not just one aspect or scene. It's the ongoing disturbing factor is the situation they've got themselves into, which is basically the whole film. Okay, we've got Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2. Let's talk about them in order. I'm gonna get myself in so much trouble. Terrifier, the first film, is kind of a more straightforward, simple design and premise. We're following a killer clown, and this is just, it is kind of shock for shock value, I would say, the original film. It does have a story that makes sense a lot more than some of these stories here, and you know, they do have an arc that they're working towards. The question is, would I put it in campy? Because this is a clown. We're talking about Art the Clown in this, who is being obnoxious on purpose, and that's kind of like the funny thing to it. But there is some brutalization that is done in this film that brought up a lot of questions. I did interviews with both Art the Clown and the director, Damien, and we talked about a lot of this. If you want to check out those interviews, they're quite old, but it was a lot of really interesting stuff that he put in there that he still hasn't answered, and I hope he will answer in Terrifier 3. So definitely look out for those interviews. But I think because of the shocking scene with the woman, if you know, you know, that this film actually goes pretty close to the top. It's a hard one. We also need to remind ourselves we're putting these in order for not what we like the most, but for what is the most disturbing. So you know what? I would put Terrifier at the top because of that scene, but is it because of that scene that it's only one disturbing element? I wouldn't say it sticks with you, because psychologically, I don't think it sticks with you. It's just more the iconic look of Art, and more that people want to dress like him, so I don't know if that's disturbing to that nature. You know what? I think I'm gonna put Terrifier there, because it is that scene in particular I'm thinking about. Otherwise, it's just Art the Clown kind of like messing with them. But do stay with me, because I would put Terrifier 2 up the top, no questions. I think that Terrifier 2 was shock for shock value. The extended scene, I mean, there's a lot of extended scenes in that film, but extended gore, very detailed gore, and that was their intent, was to make a shocking, evil film that really pushed the boundaries, and it was really surprising that you were able to see it in the cinema. So I really do think it is evil. No, I think it's very shock value, and some of those scenes are just horrendous, like just go on forever. Is that fair? What do you guys think? I would still think that these films here, they've traumatized me in a different way than these films that feel more gore orientated. So I guess that's an interesting pattern that we've found. Okay, from here we've got The Exorcist, which a lot of people just kept saying The Exorcist. I don't find The Exorcist disturbing. I do understand that for its time it was super disturbing, super shocking, but in comparison to a lot of films here, it definitely has a storyline. It has a great intention. It fulfills its premise. Even though Reagan says some really horrendous stuff for a child, it all falls within the realms of, you know, the devil, Pazuzu. It all falls within, you know, Captain Howdy's shtick. She's meant to do things that are completely out of character, so it does make sense. It's not completely just for shock value, I don't believe. Obviously, it's based on a book as well. But I would put this one, I don't know, I don't find The Exorcist to be that disturbing. I love The Exorcist. But again, this is always going to be perspective, because what is disturbing to you has got to do with your perception, how you grew up, when you started watching horror, what you started watching as horror, your perspective of the world and what actually scares you. So all of our lists are going to be different. The Exorcist is a hard one. It's almost like I should put it here because I know a lot of you guys keep saying that it disturbed you so much. I love this film and I don't find it to be a hard watch. I find it just to be scary. Not disturbing, just scary. So I'm actually going to put The Exorcist in horror. I know that's a weird thing to do, but for me, it just feels right. Speaking of something that doesn't feel right, this is The Girl Next Door. Of course, An American Crime is the other film that you probably know quite well. Both the same story based on a true story about a girl who's just brutalized, absolutely brutalized. And this is Jack Ketchum's story of events. Or, you know, retelling. And this film is just awful, 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 awful. But it does have a purpose because it is telling a real life story. There is a start and an end. Some of these things don't have a start and the end, okay? So I would actually put this as truly traumatizing. It's one of the, I will not watch this film, but I do think it falls very much in a traumatizing movie that is not just made for vile shock value, although it does feel like that at times. I think that you'll agree with me with that. Hopefully you guys agree. The next film is Last House on the Left. I rewatched this today. I can tell you without a doubt, the most disturbing thing about this film is the soundtrack. This film is perverted and it starts off being about these two girls going to a concert and how they get roped in with these insane psychotic killers and how they're just brutalized, tortured. It's awful. It's horrendous what happens. And then there's just, it ends very strangely, but the whole film, everything that's happening to them, they have this kind of folky music that just does not fit. It feels like there is a lot of different music genres going on, but it just never falls within the realms of what is actually happening. And it kind of takes away from just hearing the stone cold screams, having this like happy kind of montagey music. I can't explain it. It's very strange. And I started off thinking that this film was more campy because of that, but it really does get into traumatizing territory and it shows a lot, except there is a scene where actually I can't say because it's a spoiler, but there is a scene where someone's meant to be and their body is moving. So there's a lot of strangeness in this film that it almost goes into campy because it's exaggerated over the top and with the music. But I do think that this is actually a truly traumatizing film. I don't think there's any reason that this would be made not to be an exploitive film. I think it was made for that purpose, to be a shocking, you know, teen film and to really pave the way for I Spit on Your Grave, because those films really belong together in a very sad universe. So I'm gonna put that one as vile. I think it's a vile film. It's gross. It's an interesting one. Okay, Loved Ones. This one also comes up a lot. And I love that we got an Australian one in there. Almost put Wolf Creek, but Wolf Creek would just be horror. And you know what? I think The Loved Ones, although it has some disturbing scenes, it's a film about obsession gone wrong, very wrong, and a girl who's obsessed with a guy and how he gets into this really awful situation. There's torture in it, but I don't think it's to the extent of some of the other films that we've spoken about, especially in the gore department. I actually don't think that this film is, as from my memory, as gory as some of the other films here. There is some intense gore, don't get me wrong, there is some torture, but it's definitely not more torture than Hostel or Saw. I would definitely put this in. It's just a horror movie, guys. Don't freak out. The Sadness. Now this is gore for the sake of gore. The Sadness is one of the most intense freaking rides. This is a Taiwanese horror about an outbreak that makes people sadistic. From start to end, it is shocking, it is vile, it is a lot. It is one of the most disgusting films I've ever seen, hands down. More disgusting than anything, I think, on here. But I do think it's an interesting film. All of the gore is in very unique ways. It's scary, and it satisfies the brief. It does feel like a well-rounded story, believe it or not. I think The Sadness is a great film. It is evil shock value for sure. I don't know if it belongs next to all of these guys though, because again, this is hard because I can't put this on value. See, I'm getting myself into a little hole where I'm talking about films I like and trying to compare that way, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So you know what? I think it does go up the top. I'm sorry, I love you, Sadness, I love you, but you are very shocking. This is The Skin I Live In, a Spanish horror thriller sci-fi that is so twisty. I've spoken about this a lot in disturbing lists. I think that this film is unforgettable. Absolutely disturbing. So good though. It's such a great film. It's not that gory, but it does have some really intense scenes and the messages behind them are quite intense. So I almost want to put this one all the way up here, but I just don't think it lives up to the level of these ones. I really don't find it as disturbing as this, but it is quite, I don't think it's as easy as these ones. Do you know what I mean? It's very hard to compare, but I would probably put it, I mean, if it's near Audition, that makes sense. Or Found, that does make sense. It's just some of these films have such different themes, it's so hard to contrast, but that's the challenge of this, I guess. If you haven't seen The Skin I Live In, I highly recommend it. It is such a well put together film that has really stuck with me, so it definitely belongs up there. Okay, The Woman. This is another Jack Ketchum film. This is actually a sequel, and it is just a film about pure brutalization, and I refuse to watch this film again, to be honest. I'm just gonna put it straight up there, guys. The Woman is a film about someone who was captured and tortured, basically the whole film. And to call it The Woman and just do that is, I mean, it's very akin to Dead Girl, isn't it? It's horrendous. It's a horrendous story, and I have never seen a justification for it that makes any sense. If you have one, let me know down below. I don't have much more to say about that one, but I do have a lot to say about Tusk. Tusk is one of my favorite horror films, and I didn't know a lot of people hated it. I think a lot of people find it disturbing and strange, but for me, it's all camp. It's all camp here. We're just here for the camp goodness, and Tusk delivers it every single time. The poster gives away a lot. Let's talk about that. The poster gives away a lot, but it is a body horror about a cocky podcaster who just winds up really flaunting himself in the wrong area, thinking he's untouchable, and he just meets the wrong guy. It is a very interesting ride, and I just think it's so unique that it does stick with you. It's disturbing, but it's definitely campy. It's all about the camp, and some people probably don't see that and think it's really silly, but that's what I love about it. It falls really close to Human Centipede for me, which is really interesting now that we look at this, because in here we just have the body horror. So I honestly, what does that say about me? I think it's campy. I don't know. It's very odd. Okay, I can't believe we made it, but we are at the last one, and this is When Evil Lurks. This film definitely shocked a lot of people when it came out last year. It's about a family living in a rural countryside, and they find true evil lurking. And unfortunately, their plan to try and put a stop to it unleashes even more evil upon everyone they love, and maybe the human race. The film has some jaw-dropping moments, that's for sure. Some really visceral gore that is shocking, again, unique, which we love, and very challenging. Some of those moments would be, you know, totally so disturbing it sticks with you, but it really then transforms into more of a horror movie with good versus evil. So I would actually put that here, believe it or not, because I think that the film is shocking for sure, but it seems like it's less of an overarching disturbing nature and more of really shocking moments. I could probably call out like the 3 most top shocking moments in that film, and everything else turns into more of, you know, almost like what, you know, Sinister or The Exorcist is, with that feeling of danger and ominous fear and dread. But I wouldn't say it overall is like the most disturbing film I've ever seen, but it's a good one. It's a good one. Okay, there you go. There is some controversial picks there for sure. This is the amazing thing about movies, and especially horror. There's so many ways you can divide it, chop it up, change it, and it doesn't mean anything that's on the bottom is better than anything on the top. In fact, you probably want to flip that. But it definitely puts some perspective on what scares you and what disturbs you, and maybe will make you think about those things and how different they are. Because although The Exorcist is very low, I find The Exorcist to be very scary, but I don't find it to be very disturbing. I would love to hear your thoughts down below, and let me know if you like this video. If you lasted all the way to the end, you are a champ. I hope you guys are having a great day. Here are some videos that I have done recently, and I'll see you all very soon. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye, friends.